Hey, what's going on, Center City Church?
You already know.
By the time we're done with this, you're going to be an expert at that.
Yeah, it's a thing. You have to mentally prepare yourself for it.
You
You really do. Like sometimes I'll be back there, be like, okay, get in the zone, get in the zone, get in the zone. John Gonzalez just makes it so easy, though.
He does, absolutely.
Just exudes it.
Well, welcome to our podcast where we spend a little bit time getting a little bit deeper on Sunday's message, and we have with us Miss Emma Gerard in the house.
Boom, boom, boom. Yes, I'm super excited to be here.
I'm excited for you to be here.
Yeah, I mean, we'll knock it off. We'll get started. So we're in week 7.
Yes,
seven weeks of generations, which has been super exciting. And I really liked this message this past week because I felt like it was practical. I also really liked all your stories that you gave. I love hearing stories. I feel like everybody loves hearing your stories. You're an awesome storyteller. And I was thinking about my own car, my own first car. I am most definitely the person that I wanted to start driving as soon as I got my permit and everything, but I couldn't. And so when I did get my first car, it was Sally, my 1999 Honda Civic that we had. We still have. She's just there.
I could swear that your back bumper was held up with stickers. You had so many
It
stickers.
was held up with stickers. I drove this white 1999 Honda Civic. Half the time it didn't have any gas in it. One time I had to call, you were a youth pastor, and I think I called you and saying, I can't. It just doesn't. And then Justin, your associate, had to come and get me. So I didn't really take care. I didn't steward Sally well, is the point there. But I do have a few questions, mostly because I like to get kind of practical. But kind of starting off of your first point, what would you say to somebody that's kind of struggling to align to this whole idea of, I want to be more in love with the person who gave me this vision. I'm kind of struggling to do that. Or I'm struggling to kind of find my way back to, I love this thing this miracle that I've been given. I am struggling to kind of realign with the miracle giver.
Yeah, realignment is difficult a lot of times because it forces us to deal with issues of comfort. That's just the bottom line. We are, by nature, people who enjoy our comfort. We enjoy when we get into the groove. We enjoy when we find something that's satisfying and something that kind of makes us feel good. So to realign ourselves when we feel like everything's good is challenging. So I know it kind of falls in line with the context of the message, but really that concept of remembering is a spiritual discipline that I believe is practical. That's why I believe so strongly in journaling for a lot of people, because we can go back and see how God showed up in those dark seasons. Yeah. And although the blessing is incredible, when we're reminded of how faithful He is, it allows us sometimes to just kind of make those tweaks that realign us to putting our eyes and focus and attention on Him.
Yeah, let's talk about that journaling part, because I think that can be a really important practice for somebody right now. What if you're cool with it, if you're down with it, what's your journaling process? Because I know you're a big journaler, I'm a big journaler. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so my journaling process is probably a little bit different than yours. So like our journals probably look a lot different. My journal feels more like a prayer list and a list of prayers and then prayers answered. I also journal through scripture, so it's a very big, I do the SOAP method when it comes to personal development. And then I use journals to basically jot down random notes. So the thing with my journaling system that a lot of people actually, I don't know if it'll work for everybody, but it really is kind of random. But I'm learning as the older I get too, is one of the things that's super important is not just journaling, but the ability to go back and review journals. When you first start journaling, you're just trying to knock it out. But then later on, you see the value of picking up a journal. I picked up a journal that I wrote, close to 14 years ago when I first moved up here to the Charlotte area. And I remember, I was thumbing through and remembering where my head was at and kind of some of the struggles I was having and some of the visions that I was having and kind of what the Lord was saying to me. And just amazed to look back 15 years and see what God has done and see Him, accomplishing promises that 15 years ago I didn't even have the nerve to actually pray. So that's what I appreciate about journaling. So my journaling's a little random, but I do the SOAP method for personal Bible study, and then my journal is filled with this is who I'm praying for, this is when it was answered, that type of thing.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting that you say, I was never, when it comes to journaling, and Joey will tell you, we were just in the process of moving, so I have this entire trunk full of journals, and Joey was just kind of looking through them like, can we get rid of some of these? That's a wrong answer. That would be mortifying. Imagine finding my journals in your local Charlotte Goodwill. Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Ooh, cringy. But he was looking at them, he's like, why are these half written in? And because I would always say, whenever I was done with the season, I was done with the journal. Recently, though, I got distracted as I was cleaning, and I found a journal, and it was the journal that I was writing in right before Joey and I got married, right before we moved to Charlotte, right before you became the pastor of Center City, and right before I graduated from Southeastern. And so I was looking through this journal, and on the last page, I was asking the Lord, what's my next step? What does this look like? I have never finished a journal. Maybe once or twice this season. I think it was really only until this past year, over the summer, I had finished a journal. And something in me was like, you should finish this journal. And so I thought about this while
That's
we were
awesome.
writing the message, where it was almost like because you and I had this conversation earlier in this week of almost remembering the miracle giver, remembering this
absolutely.
earlier this week. And so I sat down, and yesterday morning I answered what was the next part. And so I think that's really powerful,
That's
even in
huge,
that. And I was
huge.
thinking about that. I was like, man, it's really, really hard sometimes in that moment to think, for the college grad, for the new parent, for the person that's been in the same job or in a new job, to be like, we always want to think about what's next. I've always been a what's next girl. But to be able to answer my 3-year younger self now and be like, hey, this was what was next.
Well, I think that, again, it goes back to that point of remembrance. We do a really good job. I think it's almost natural to spend focused time thinking about what's next. We don't spend a lot of time thinking through God's faithfulness, specifically when the promise has been answered. It's really tough sometimes to look back now that we've received the shiny thing that we've been waiting for. So I do think it's a spiritual discipline that we need to kind of get into our gut, to spend time remembering how faithful God has been, and that allows us to stay aligned to his voice.
Yeah, I love that. All right, let me look at my called in questions. I think that this is, what's a time where this is more personal, but what's a time where you kind of had to think about and trust in the next step? So kind of veering away from the miracle, but when's the time that you had to trust that he was going to bring the next step for you, if you could?
Yeah, I mean, there were some personal times. I know if you've been around for any amount of time, you've heard me talk through kind of the struggle we had with infertility and with the boys and waiting on the boys. There was a couple seasons where I kind of was like looking at Jess thinking, we've kind of exhausted all the options we know to exhaust, and we don't know what's next. To be perfectly honest with you, in some regards, I'm sitting in the middle of one of those seasons now, if I'm being 100% transparent with you, where I'm excited about the next season, but there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered and how that's going to all work out. And it's the passion I have for what I feel like God's calling us to build that's going to drive me through some of those questions being unanswered. And I'm excited about that. But yeah, I think like even right now, we're sitting in the middle of a season like that.
Yeah, I would agree. What would you say to the person that's trying to identify, am I in the what's next season, or am I in the I need to remember the miracle season? Or is there an in-between in that, you would say?
Yeah, it's a little tough because I think sometimes we have a tendency of believing that everything's black and white. You could receive one promise on one hand and still be waiting for another promise on another. So like, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like there are seasons where, I don't know, maybe it's a relationship that you've been waiting on and praying for and believing God for. And at the same time, the promise of a career path might have opened wide up and God's blessing that career and you're seeing some kind of upward mobility and some maybe even promotions and raises, and that's incredible. Like, so I think really it's not necessarily individual seasons, but it's seasons in different areas of life that we really just need to be mindful of. I never feel like you should stop remembering, and I never feel like you shouldn't be moving forward, which oddly enough is where we'll spend the majority of our time next Sunday, because even once you've received the promise, I said this a couple weeks ago, but it's like a life statement of mine. We're not done until we're dead. Like there is work to be done. We're still here. We're not home. There's work to be done. So there is always this tension of being able to be good at what God is currently doing, celebrating what he's done in the past, and looking forward to what he'll do in the future. The problem is that in an unhealthy heart, we live in one of these three places and ignore the other two. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of people find themselves unhealthy.
My last question for you, kind of switching gears a little bit. You talked briefly about tuning in and tuning into the Lord and tuning into all of these things. What would you say practically? Somebody's saying, where do I start?
People are going to hate this response because I feel like somebody is waiting for this really in-depth, convoluted 15-step process that leads to another 10-step process. Time in your word and prayer is what tunes your voice, right? It's my belief that when the scripture speaks about how we're created in the image of God. That concept that God created us in his image means that he's also, by nature, has tuned our ear to his voice. You know what your mom sounds like. You know what your dad sounds like. You know what your family sounds like. And if God is saying, I made you after my image, I think that even as children, we can hear the voice of God. There are times when my boys had said some things and I'm like, my goodness, because I really do believe that the Spirit is speaking. And if we can just tune our ear, and as kids, there's nothing that's detuning the ear. Now, fast forward in most of our lives at 20 and 30 and 40 years old, 50 years old, there's been a lot of things that have tried to deafen us to the sound of the voice of the Lord. There's a lot of noise pollution, and we got to be careful. I find myself even at points, it's tough to hear God in seasons when I'm spending an absorbent amount of time entertaining myself, whether it's social media or movies or even random conversations and books that really have nothing to do with edifying the Lord. Although, again, take your downtime, watch your movies, that's fine. Like, I have anything against that. But when there's too much of it, there is this tendency of your ear being detuned to the voice of God. So consistent time in prayer, consistent time in your word. It's like anything else. I can learn the tune of my wife's voice when I spend focused time listening. I spend focused time responding. We spend focused time in conversation. So the more time you spend in conversation with the Lord, the more you're going to be able to hear his voice.
Mic drop on that one. I think that's all the questions I have for you, PJ.
Well, that's good.
That's it?
I mean, that's a great deal. So this Sunday, we're super excited.
We are super excited.
We're going to have an opportunity to really kind of commission one of our own here at Center City, which I'm really excited about. So you'll have to make sure that you're here for that. And we got some news for the congregation this Sunday.
Boom, boom,
Some
or
pretty
wait,
big
it's
news.
not boom, boom. It's pew, 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 pew.
Yeah, the other one sounds like someone just got hit by a
Boom,
car or
boom.
something.
That sounds, honestly, Blue's Clues used to make that noise.
Oh, there you go. That's what it is.
There you go.
Anyway, so make sure you tune in this Sunday, or make sure you're here live Sunday. We've had so many people start returning back.
We're so excited.
Sunday morning. It's been so cool to see so many families that we haven't seen in a while and reconnect. So we would love to see you here, and we cannot wait for you to be a part of all that God's doing.
Super excited. Well, we will see you at 10 a.m., whether you're here, whether you're online, all those good things.
Yeah.
We'll see you, church.